This check is fake, and you're a fraud." The words, sharp and venomous, cut through the quiet hum of the bank lobby. Before the man in the navy linen blazer could even respond, a fist clad in a police officer's leather glove slammed into his jaw, the sickening crack echoing off the marble floor. "You think you can just waltz in here, kid? You're going to jail for a long, long time." They had no idea they had just assaulted the man who signed their paychecks. They had no idea their lives were already over. What happens when unchecked arrogance meets unimaginable power? And how much is a moment of prejudice truly worth? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And hit that like button and subscribe because you are not going to want to miss a single second of this story. Elmwood Drive wasn't just a street. It was a statement. Lined with ancient maple trees that formed a dense, leafy canopy. It was the oldest and wealthiest enclave in the city, a place where Gilded Age mansions stood beside sleek, modern fortresses of glass and steel. The residents of Elmwood Drive were a tribe unto themselves, old money, new tech money, and the surgeons and lawyers who served them. They were accustomed to a certain kind of quiet, a certain kind of neighbor, a certain kind of beige, predictable harmony. That harmony was shattered, not with a loud noise, but with the quiet arrival of a man who didn't fit their mold. His name was Marcus Hale. At 42, Marcus moved with a deliberate, unhurried grace that seemed at odds with the frantic energy of the modern world. He was tall and lean, with a jawline that looked like it had been carved from obsidian, and eyes that held a deep, unnerving stillness. He bought the old Willowbrook estate, a sprawling stone manor that had sat empty for years, and paid for it in cash. The neighborhood realtors gossiped for weeks. No mortgage, no financing, just a wire transfer that would have made a small country's GDP blush. He didn't arrive in a flashy new money supercar. He arrived in a perfectly restored 1970 Jaguar E-Type, its British racing green paint gleaming under the dappled sunlight. He didn't throw a lavish party. He simply moved in. The whispers started immediately, rustling through the neighborhood like the autumn leaves that now skittered across manicured lawns. They saw him in the mornings, sometimes jogging in a simple black tracksuit, other times sitting on his stone veranda with a cup of coffee, dressed in tailored trousers and a cashmere sweater. But it was his evening attire that truly baffled them. Often he'd wear vibrant jewel-toned linen blazers, a shocking splash of sapphire blue or garnet red against the muted palette of Elmwood Drive. It was a choice that was both elegant and, in their eyes, audacious. It wasn't the quiet Brooks Brothers uniform of their husbands. It was different, and different was suspect. Who was he? A rapper? An athlete who just signed a massive contract? The theories flew back and forth over cocktails at the country club and in hushed tones during yoga classes. They were tinged with a blend of curiosity and a low-grade unspoken prejudice. He was a black man living in a multi-million-dollar mansion in a neighborhood where the only other black faces they saw were the hired help in their world. This was an anomaly, a disruption to the natural order of things. He was polite, offering a quiet nod to the neighbors he passed. But he was also private. He didn't volunteer information. He didn't seek their approval. This aloofness, this self-contained confidence was interpreted not as dignity, but as arrogance. He didn't seem to care that he didn't belong, and that was the most offensive part of all. They watched him from behind their curtains, their minds filling in the blanks with lazy, ugly stereotypes. He had to be into something illegal. Drugs, money laundering. The money had to be dirty. It was the only explanation that made sense in their small, carefully curated world. They didn't know he owned the world they lived in. They didn't know his name was on the charter of the very bank they used, the very institutions that held their precious fortunes. They just saw a black man in a navy linen blazer who had the audacity to be their neighbor. And for some, that was a crime in itself. Officer Tom Riley liked his routine. At 45 years old, he had been a cop for 18 years, and the city had changed in ways he despised. He was a man made of straight lines and hard angles. From his military-style crew cut to the rigid set of his jaw, he saw the world in black and white. Good guys and bad guys. Us and them. And for Officer Riley, the them category had grown alarmingly large. He nursed his resentments like a warm beer, bitter and flat. He felt the world had passed him by, that younger, less deserving people were getting ahead while he was stuck patrolling the same affluent streets, protecting people who looked down on him. His beat included Elmwood Drive, and the arrival of Marcus Hale was a personal affront. Every time he drove past the Willowbrook estate and saw that gleaming Jaguar, a knot of acid would twist in his gut. It felt wrong, unnatural. His favorite place to vent these frustrations was at a greasy spoon diner just off his patrol route, where the coffee was burnt and the vinyl on the booths was cracked. It was there he often met with the one person in the neighborhood who seemed to understand his worldview. Kevin Hargrove. Hargrove, at 38, was the new branch manager for Hargrove Banking, the most prestigious bank in the area. He had a weak chin, a handshake that was always a little too firm, and a desperate ambition that radiated off him like cheap cologne. He'd gotten the job through a combination of relentless networking and a talent for telling his superiors exactly what they wanted to hear. To him, the Elmwood Drive branch was a stepping stone, his ticket to the corporate boardroom. He saw the wealthy clients not as people, but as assets to be managed and leveraged for his own advancement. He also shared Riley's belief in a certain natural order. "You see him again?" Riley grumbled, stirring his coffee so aggressively it slopped over the side of the mug. "Mr. Linen Blazer took a package from a delivery truck this morning. Looked shifty as hell." Hargrove, picking at a dry piece of toast, smirked. "Oh, our new celebrity neighbor, the talk of the town. My wife saw him at the gourmet market yesterday. Said he bought a bottle of wine that costs more than my car payment and didn't even blink. Has to be a front for something." "Damn right it is," Riley said, leaning forward, his voice dropping. "I ran his plates. Clean, ran his name. Nothing. That's what's suspicious. Guys like that with that kind of money, they always have a paper trail, a traffic ticket, something. This guy, it's like he just appeared out of thin air. I'm telling you, Kevin, he's a trafficker or a money launderer. Why else would a guy like that move into a neighborhood like this?" The unspoken phrase hung in the air between them. A guy like that? A black man? Hargrove nodded enthusiastically. He saw the world through the same dirty lens as Riley. To him, Marcus Hale wasn't a potential high-value client. He was a threat to the branch's pristine reputation. He was a risk. "I'm with you, Tom. You have to be careful. We get people trying to pass bad paper all the time. Sophisticated stuff. They come in all smiles and fancy clothes trying to pull a fast one. You let one of them slip through and corporate comes down on you like a ton of bricks." "Well, you just keep an eye out," Riley said, tapping a thick finger on the table for emphasis. "He ever comes into your bank, you call me directly. Don't go through dispatch. You call my cell. We can't have that element getting a foothold here." "You got it," Hargrove said, a gleam in his eye. The thought excited him. An opportunity to prove his worth, to be the vigilant gatekeeper of the community's wealth. An opportunity to put someone he instinctively disliked in their place. He felt a sense of camaraderie with the officer, a shared purpose. They were the protectors of this place, the guardians of its purity. They were two small men puffed up with a sense of their own importance, forging a pact built on the ugly foundation of their shared prejudice. They had no idea they were conspiring to take a swing at a god. They were just two bullies in a diner waiting for their chance to prove how tough they were. And they wouldn't have to wait long. The lobby of Hargrove Banking's Elmwood branch was designed to be intimidating. The floors were polished Italian marble. The ceilings were cathedral high, and a massive modernist chandelier that looked like a frozen explosion of glass and brass hung in the center. The air was cool and smelled faintly of money and lemon-scented cleaner. It was a place of hushed reverence, where transactions were conducted in low, respectful tones. The silence was broken by the quiet click of Marcus Hale's leather-soled shoes as he crossed the floor. He was wearing a blazer of deep navy linen that seemed to absorb the light, paired with perfectly tailored khaki trousers. He looked more like he was on his way to a gallery opening than a bank. He was the only black man in the lobby. Every eye, from the tellers behind their glass partitions to the customers waiting in line, was on him. He bypassed the line and walked directly to the concierge desk, where a young woman with a practiced smile sat. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice a low, calm baritone. "I'd like to speak with the branch manager, please." The smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "No, I don't. It should only take a moment. I'm a new resident in the area and I need to open an account. The manager, not a teller." This was a deviation from the script. She hesitated, then pressed a button on her phone. "Mr. Hargrove, there's a gentleman here to see you. He'd like to open a new account." She listened for a moment, her eyes flicking back to Marcus. "Yes, sir. I'll send him in." Kevin Hargrove was in his glass-walled office reviewing loan applications. When his assistant announced the walk-in, he was annoyed. His time was valuable. But when he looked up and saw Marcus Hale standing at the threshold, annoyance curdled into suspicion. It was him, Mr. Linen Blazer. Tom Riley's words echoed in his head. "He ever comes into your bank, you call me." Hargrove's posture straightened. He plastered on a thin, professional smile and gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Mr. Hargrove, please have a seat. What can I do for you today?" "My name is Marcus Hale," Marcus said, his movements fluid. As he sat down, he placed a slim leather portfolio on the polished mahogany desk. "As I mentioned, I've recently moved into the neighborhood, and I wish to establish a relationship with your bank. I'd like to open a primary checking account." "Of course, Mr. Hale. We'd be delighted to have your business," Hargrove said, his tone oozing a false sincerity. "We'll just need some standard identification and an initial deposit to get you started." Marcus opened his portfolio and produced a brand-new state driver's license and a cashier's check. He slid them across the desk. Hargrove picked up the license first, scrutinizing the photo. It was him. The address listed was the Willowbrook Estate. Then he picked up the check, and his blood ran cold. It wasn't a starting deposit of a few thousand. It wasn't even $50,000, sellers. The check issued by a major international bank was made out to Marcus Hale for the amount of $3,000. $3 million. Hargrove's mind short-circuited. The prejudice he had been nursing, the suspicion he had discussed with Riley, all of it erupted into a single blinding certainty. This was impossible. A black man in a linen blazer didn't just walk in off the street with a check for $3 million. It had to be a fake. A high-quality, sophisticated fake, but a fake nonetheless. His heart began to hammer in his chest. This was it. This was the test Riley had warned him about. "This is a substantial amount, Mr. Hale," Hargrove said, his voice suddenly tight. He tried to keep his hands from shaking as he held the check up to the light, pretending to examine a watermark he knew nothing about. "It's the proceeds from a recent asset sale," Marcus said evenly, his eyes watching Hargrove with an unnerving calm. "Is there a problem?" "A problem?" "No. No, of course not," Hargrove lied, his mind racing. "It's just with a check of this size, we have certain verification protocols we must follow for your protection." Of course, he was stalling. He needed to get Riley here. This could take some time to clear, several business days, perhaps even longer. That's unusual for a cashier's check from a prime bank, Marcus noted, his voice still perfectly level, but with a new hard edge to it. Are you suggesting there is an issue with the validity of this instrument, Mr. Hargrove? The direct question rattled Hargrove. He felt like he was being cornered. This man's confidence, his utter lack of nervousness. It was all part of the act. He was a professional, a con man. I'm not suggesting anything, Hargrove snapped, his professional veneer cracking. I'm telling you our policy. He stood up, the check still in his hand. If you'll excuse me, I need to consult with our fraud department. Please, wait here. Bonjour. He walked out of his office, his heart pounding. He didn't go to the fraud department. He pulled out his cell phone, his thumb hovering over his recent calls. He found the name he was looking for. Tom Riley. Kevin Hargrove's call to Officer Tom Riley was short and breathless. He's here, the guy from Elmwood. He's in my office right now. What's he doing? Riley's voice was a low growl over the phone. Trying to deposit a check, a cashier's check. Tom, for $3 million, it's got to be fake. There's no way it's real. A thrill, dark and ugly, shot through Riley. Don't let him leave. I'm 2 blocks away. Stall him, I'm coming. The line went dead. Hargrove took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. He felt a surge of adrenaline. He was doing the right thing. He was protecting the bank. He was a hero. He walked back towards his office, his stride filled with a new, unearned authority. He didn't go inside. He stood in the doorway, looking down at Marcus, who hadn't moved. We're running a verification on the check, Mr. Hale. It may take a while. I'm going to have to ask you to remain here. Marcus slowly raised his head, his calm eyes locking onto Hargrove's. The look was so direct, so penetrating that Hargrove felt a momentary tremor of doubt. But he quickly suppressed it. He couldn't back down now. Am I being detained, Mr. Hargrove? Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. It's just procedure, Hargrove said dismissively, avoiding the question. He gestured vaguely to the lobby. You can wait out here if you'd like. He wanted him out in the open. He wanted an audience for what was about to happen. Marcus stood up, a fluid and silent motion, and walked back into the main lobby, the portfolio still in his hand. He didn't sit. He simply stood by the marble pillar, a picture of perfect, infuriating patience. The other customers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. The tellers whispered behind their hands. The atmosphere in the bank had turned from quiet reverence to a thick, anxious silence. 5 minutes passed. Then the glass doors of the bank swung open with a chime, and Officer Tom Riley filled the entrance. He wasn't alone. He had brought a younger, nervous-looking rookie with him. Riley's eyes scanned the lobby and immediately locked on Marcus. A slow, triumphant smirk spread across his face. He saw everything his prejudice had prepared him to see. A black man in a flashy blazer who was clearly out of his element. A criminal. He and Hargrove exchanged a look, a silent confirmation of their shared purpose. Riley strode forward, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered gun, his boots making loud, aggressive thuds on the marble floor. "This the guy!" Riley barked, not even looking at Hargrove, his eyes fixed on Marcus. "That's him," Hargrove said, stepping forward, his voice filled with self-importance. "He's trying to pass a fraudulent check." Marcus turned his head slowly to face them. He looked from Riley's snarling face to Hargrove's smug expression. He said nothing. "Let me see some ID," Riley demanded, getting right in Marcus's face. "And the check." Hargrove eagerly handed the check to Riley. Marcus, meanwhile, reached into his pocket and produced his driver's license. Riley snatched it from his hand. He glanced at it, then at the check, and then laughed, a short, ugly, contemptuous sound. Marcus Hale from the Willowbrook estate. Riley sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. And a check for $3 million? You really thought you could pull this off, didn't you? The check is valid, officer, Marcus said, his voice as cold and hard as the marble beneath their feet. And you have my identification. I suggest you run it. Oh, I'll run it. All right, Riley said, his face turning a blotchy red. He hated being told what to do. He hated the man's composure. It felt like disrespect. He wanted to see fear. He wanted him to beg. I think you're a fraud, and this piece of paper is fake. This check is fake, and you're a fraud, Hargrove echoed, stepping closer, feeling emboldened by the presence of the police officer. He felt powerful, untouchable. Marcus's gaze shifted to Hargrove. For the first time, a flicker of something, not anger, but a profound, chilling disappointment crossed his face. You are making a catastrophic mistake, Mr. Hargrove. That was the trigger. The quiet confidence, the lack of fear, the warning. It pushed Riley over the edge. All his pent-up resentment, his bitterness, his racism exploded in a single violent act. Don't you threaten him, kid, he snarled. And without any further warning, he drew back his fist. The younger officer's eyes went wide, but he didn't move. The bank customers gasped. Time seemed to slow down. Riley's fist, clad in a black leather glove, slammed into Marcus's jaw. The sound was a sickening crack that echoed through the silent lobby. Marcus's head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. A thin trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth, but he didn't fall. He didn't even stumble. He slowly, deliberately brought his head back to center, his eyes now like chips of ice locking onto Riley's. You're under arrest for bank fraud and forgery, Riley yelled, trying to cover his assault with procedure. He grabbed Marcus's arm and twisted it violently behind his back. The rookie jolted into action, moved to help. They slammed him against the marble pillar, the impact making him grunt in pain. Hargrove watched, his face alight with a triumphant, ugly glee. He had been right. He had stopped a criminal. He was a hero. As they cuffed Marcus's hands behind his back, Riley leaned in, his voice a triumphant whisper in Marcus's ear. You think you can just waltz in here, kid? You're going to jail for a long, long time. They shoved him towards the door, a proud public spectacle. They had no idea they had just assaulted the chairman of the board and majority shareholder of Hargrove Banking's parent company. They had no idea their lives were already over. The ride to the precinct was a blur of hostile silence. Marcus sat in the back of the patrol car, the rough plastic of the seat digging into his back, the cheap metal of the handcuffs biting into his wrists. Officer Riley drove, occasionally glancing at him in the rearview mirror, a smug, satisfied look on his face. The rookie sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, pointedly avoiding eye contact. Marcus said nothing. He didn't protest his innocence. He didn't threaten to sue. He simply sat, his breathing even, his expression unreadable. He could taste the coppery tang of blood in his mouth. He focused on the pain in his jaw. It was a grounding sensation, a sharp, clear point in a world that had suddenly gone sideways. The pain was real. It was a fact. And Marcus Hale was a man who dealt in facts. The police station was an assault on the senses. It smelled of stale coffee, disinfectant, and human desperation. The phones rang incessantly. A woman was crying at the front desk. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency, casting a pale, sickly light on the scuffed linoleum floors and drab institutional green walls. Riley shoved Marcus through the doors, parading him in front of the desk sergeant like a trophy. Got a live one, Sarge, Riley announced proudly. Bank fraud. Tried to pass a phony $3 million check at the Hargrove branch on Elmwood. The sergeant, a portly man with a face like a worn-out catcher's mitt, looked Marcus up and down. He saw the expensive linen blazer, now rumpled and stained with a small drop of blood. He saw the quiet dignity in the man's posture, even in handcuffs. He saw the swelling on his jaw. A flicker of professional skepticism crossed his face. This didn't look like their usual forger, but Riley was a veteran officer. The sergeant just grunted, "Put him in processing." The next hour was a symphony of institutional humiliation. They took his fingerprints, the black ink smearing under his nails. They took his mugshot, forcing him to hold a small whiteboard with his name on it. The flash of the camera was a small, bright explosion in the dim room. They took his personal belongings, his wallet, his watch, a vintage Patek Philippe that was worth more than the sergeant's annual salary, and his slim, elegant smartphone. They inventoried everything with a bored, methodical detachment. Through it all, Marcus remained a pillar of calm. He answered their questions in a low, even voice. Name: Marcus Hale. Address: the Willowbrook Estate, Elmwood Drive. Occupation: private investor. When they asked if he wanted to call a lawyer, he said, "No, thank you. Sorry." When they told him a public defender would be appointed, he said, "That won't be necessary." His compliance was unnerving. It wasn't the terrified submission they were used to, nor was it the belligerent defiance of a career criminal. It was something else entirely. It was the calm of a chess master who has already seen the board 5 moves ahead. It was the patience of a predator. They locked him in a small concrete holding cell with a single metal bench. The cell stank of stale sweat and urine. The door clanged shut, the sound of the lock turning echoing in the small space. He was alone. He sat on the bench, not leaning back against the grimy wall. He closed his eyes. The rage was there, a white-hot, silent inferno deep within him. It was a clean, pure fury. The public humiliation, the casual racism in Riley's voice, the sickening thud of the punch, the smug triumph on Hargrove's face. He let himself feel it for a full minute, letting the fire burn away any shock or fear. Then, with a practiced mental discipline honed in boardrooms where billions were on the line, he compressed it. He cooled it, hardened it, and shaped it into a tool. It was no longer an emotion. It was fuel. It was resolve. An hour later, a young guard came to his cell door. "You get 1 phone call," he said, his voice flat and disinterested. "Thank you," Marcus said, rising to his feet. They led him to a small, dirty alcove with a metal phone bolted to the wall. The receiver was greasy. The guard stood a few feet away, watching him with bored eyes. Marcus picked up the receiver. He didn't call a family member. He didn't call a friend. He dialed a 10-digit number from memory, a number that connected to a secure line in a law office on the 50th floor of a skyscraper 3 states away. It rang once. A crisp professional voice answered, "Lee Marcus, it's Hale." There was a pause. The voice on the other end instantly changed, sharpening with concern. "Marcus, where are you? Your security detail said you went out for a drive alone." "I'm at the 7th Precinct station downtown," Marcus said, his voice perfectly calm. "I've been arrested." Another silence, this one filled with stunned disbelief. "I need you to listen very carefully. Get a pen. We're going to war." The guard, slouched against the wall, had no idea he was listening to the first trumpet of the apocalypse. On the other end of the line, Sarah Lee, chief legal counsel for Hale Enterprises, sat bolt upright in her leather office chair. The skyline of New York glittered outside her panoramic window, but she saw none of it. The words, "I've been arrested," had sent a jolt of ice water through her veins. Sarah, a woman in her early 40s known for her razor-sharp mind and unflappable demeanor, felt a rare surge of panic. But Marcus's voice, calm, flat, and utterly devoid of fear, immediately suppressed it. This wasn't a cry for help. This was a command. She grabbed a pen, her knuckles white. "I'm listening," Sarah said, her voice now focused and steady. "First," Marcus began, his words precise and methodical, like a surgeon outlining an operation. "I want all CCTV footage from the Hargrove banking branch on Elmwood Drive. Today, between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., all cameras, interior and exterior. I want it secured, not just requested. Sarah, I want you to contact the bank's corporate head of security directly. Use my name. Tell him to pull the master files and deliver them to a local courier you will hire. I want them in our possession within the hour. I don't want a single frame to be accidentally erased." "Got it. Hargrove Banking, Elmwood Branch, footage secured." Sarah scribbled furiously on a legal pad. "Second, I want you to contact Police Commissioner Brooks, not his deputy, not his assistant. Get him on his personal cell. You have the number. Inform him that I, Marcus Hale, have been arrested by one of his officers, Tom Riley. Badge number 4. Inform him that I was physically assaulted by this officer on the floor of the bank before my arrest. Tell him that I am currently being held at the 7th Precinct. And tell him that if I am not sitting in a clean room, with a bottle of water within 15 minutes, the next person he'll be hearing from is the mayor." "Commissioner Brooks, Officer Riley. Physical assault. Understood." Sarah's mind was already working through the implications. This was no longer just a legal issue, it was a political firestorm. "Third, I want you to assemble a team. I want Jamal Rivera on civil rights. Get him on a plane. I don't care what case he's on. I want the best corporate litigation team from Davis and Polk on standby. I also want you to find the name of Hargrove Banking's regional director for this area. Find his home address. Have a process server ready to go." "Jamal Rivera, Davis and Polk, regional director. What's the charge?" Sarah asked. "Bank fraud, forgery," Marcus said, a note of bitter irony in his voice. "A bank manager named Kevin Hargrove at the Elmwood branch accused me of attempting to deposit a fraudulent cashier's check. Officer Riley expedited the arrest." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for Sarah. Hargrove Banking. The bank was a subsidiary, one of the smaller jewels in the massive crown of Hale Enterprises. Marcus didn't just bank with them, he owned them. The sheer catastrophic stupidity of what had happened was almost unfathomable. "My God, Marcus, they don't know who you are." "They know I'm a black man in a navy linen blazer." Marcus corrected her, his voice as cold as a tomb. "And right now, that's all that matters to them. They will learn who I am soon enough." "One last thing. Sarah, I want you to call the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Ellis. Tell him I'm going to have to reschedule our tennis match for tomorrow." It was a power move, a subtle but unmistakable signal. Marcus wasn't just a wealthy investor. He was a man who moved in the highest circles of power, a man whose calls were taken by generals and commissioners. He was reminding Sarah, and by extension, the world of the sheer scale of the forces he was about to unleash. "Consider it done. Marcus, we're moving. Are you all right?" For the first time, Marcus allowed a hint of the human cost to enter his voice. "My jaw is going to need some attention, but I'm fine. Just execute the plan. Sarah, burn it all down." He hung up the phone. He turned to the guard, who was staring at him with a new, confused expression. Marcus's demeanor hadn't been that of a common criminal. The names he had dropped, Commissioner Brooks, were not names you heard in a precinct holding pen. Marcus simply nodded at the guard. "I'm finished." He was led back to the cell. As the metal door clanged shut again, he felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The pieces were in motion. He had called in the airstrike. Now all he had to do was wait for the bombs to land, and he knew with absolute certainty that the first one was about to hit this very building. Captain Robert Ellis of the 7th Precinct was a man on the glide path to retirement with 2 years left until he could collect his full pension. His primary professional goal was to avoid paperwork, controversy, and any situation that might require him to make a difficult decision. His afternoon was proceeding with its usual dreary predictability when the private line on his desk, the one that bypassed the switchboard, shrieked to life. It was a number he recognized with a jolt of pure dread. The police commissioner's office. "Ellis," he answered, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Robert, what in the hell is going on in your precinct?" The voice on the other end was not the commissioner. It was his chief of staff, a man with a reputation for verbally flaying people alive. The voice was tight with panic. "I'm not sure what you mean, sir," Ellis stammered, frantically racking his brain for what he could have possibly done wrong. "Don't play dumb with me, Robert. You have Marcus Hale in one of your holding cells. Does that name mean anything to you?" Ellis's mind went blank. Hale? He'd never heard the name before. "Hale, 1 second, sir." He yelled out his office door to the front desk. "Sarge, we got a guy named Hale in holding." The desk sergeant shuffled over, flipping through his logbook. "Yeah, Captain Riley brought him in about an hour ago. Bank fraud." Ellis relayed the information into the phone. The response was a string of curses so vicious it made him hold the receiver away from his ear. "Bank fraud? Are you insane, Robert? Listen to me very carefully. Marcus Hale is the chairman of Hale Enterprises. He's one of the wealthiest men in the country. He sits on 2 presidential advisory boards. He is, and I want you to burn this into your brain, a personal friend of the commissioner, and you have him in a cage for bank fraud." The floor seemed to drop out from under Captain Ellis. His comfortable glide path to retirement had just vanished, replaced by a terrifying vertical drop. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "Sir, I had no idea. Officer Riley made the arrest." "I don't give a damn if the Archangel Gabriel made the arrest." The chief of staff roared. "The commissioner just got off the phone with Hale's legal counsel. They're alleging assault, Robert. Assault by one of your officers. This is a 5-alarm fire, and your precinct is ground 0. Here are your instructions. You are to go down to that cell personally. You are to have Mr. Hale released immediately and unconditionally. You are to offer him the most profound apology of your life. And you are to give him anything he wants. Is that clear?" "Crystal," Ellis squeaked, his voice barely a whisper. "And Robert, find Officer Riley. Take his badge and his gun. Put him on administrative leave effective immediately. He is not to speak to anyone. Keep him there. I'm on my way." The line went dead. For a moment, Ellis just sat there, paralyzed by a terror so profound it was almost sublime. This was it. The career-ending disaster every commander fears. He stumbled out of his office, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Get Hale out of that cell," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Now get him out and put him in the main conference room and get me some bottled water. The good kind." The guards, shocked by the captain's panic, scrambled to obey. They unlocked Marcus's cell door just as Marcus was getting to his feet, a small, knowing smile on his face. He had estimated it would take 12 minutes for the call to work its way down the chain of command. He'd been off by 90 seconds. They led him to the conference room. It was a bleak, windowless box with a scuffed table and mismatched chairs, but compared to the holding cell, it was a palace. A moment later, Captain Ellis burst in, a bottle of Evian water in his trembling hand. "Mr. Hale," he began, his voice fawning and desperate. "There has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. I cannot apologize enough. You are, of course, free to go. We can have a car take you anywhere you'd like. All charges are being dropped." Marcus took the bottle of water. He twisted the cap and took a slow, deliberate sip. He looked at the terrified man in front of him. "Free to go. Dropping the charges?" That was never the point. That was an escape. He wanted a reckoning. "I'm not going anywhere, Captain," Marcus said, his voice quiet, but carrying the unmistakable weight of absolute authority. "We have a great deal to discuss. Please have a seat and send someone to find Mr. Kevin Hargrove from the bank and Officer Tom Riley. I'd like them to join us. We're going to have a meeting." Captain Ellis stared at him, his mouth agape. Marcus Hale wasn't leaving. He was taking over. The nightmare wasn't ending. It was just beginning. The precinct conference room, normally a place for dreary briefings and union disputes, had transformed into the epicenter of a crisis. Captain Ellis sat at the far end of the table, looking as if he were waiting for a firing squad. He had dispatched 2 of his most senior detectives with a single frantic order. "Find Kevin Hargrove and bring him to the station. Not arrest him, escort him." The distinction was critical. Meanwhile, another officer had been sent to find Tom Riley, who was in the break room, boasting about the arrest to anyone who would listen. Marcus sat at the head of the table, a position he assumed with natural, unspoken authority. He was no longer a prisoner. He was a king holding court in the heart of his enemy's castle. He had politely declined Ellis's offer of a phone to make his own calls, knowing that Sarah Lee was already orchestrating everything. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the frantic footsteps in the hallway outside. The first to arrive was Kevin Hargrove. The detectives had found him in his office, pining over his heroic actions. They had informed him that he was requested at the 7th Precinct regarding the Marcus Hale case. Hargrove had arrived full of swagger, assuming he was there to sign a witness statement and receive a pat on the back. When he walked into the conference room and saw Marcus Hale sitting at the head of the table, not in a holding cell, with the precinct captain sitting meekly at the other end, his confidence evaporated. The blood drained from his face. This was wrong. This was all wrong. "Mr. Hargrove, thank you for joining us," Marcus said, his voice smooth as silk. He gestured to a chair. "Please." Hargrove sat down stiffly, his eyes darting between Marcus and the captain. "What's going on? I don't understand." "You will," Marcus said. The door opened again. Tom Riley was shoved into the room by his sergeant. His face was a mask of confusion and belligerent anger. "What the hell is this, Captain? I was told I was on leave. Why am I in a room with him?" He jabbed a thumb towards Marcus. "Sit down and shut up, Tom," Ellis hissed, his career flashing before his eyes. Riley, shocked by his captain's tone, reluctantly took a seat. He glared at Marcus, his mind unable to process the power shift that had so clearly taken place. An hour ago, this man was his prisoner. Now he was at the head of a table Riley had been ordered to sit at. Just as the tension reached a breaking point, the door opened one last time. A man in a flawlessly tailored, expensive suit entered. He was in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and a deeply worried expression. He looked at Marcus with a mixture of deference and panic. "Mr. Hale, I'm William Grant, the regional director for Hargrove Banking. I came as soon as I heard—" "I am so sorry." He had clearly been summoned by corporate, a call undoubtedly triggered by Sarah Lee. He ignored everyone else in the room and focused solely on Marcus. "William?" Marcus acknowledged him with a slight nod. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please have a seat. I believe you know one of your branch managers, Mr. Kevin Hargrove." Grant's head snapped towards Hargrove. The look in his eyes was one of pure, unadulterated fury. Hargrove visibly shrank in his chair. The pieces were starting to click together in his terrified mind, forming a picture of his own professional ruin. The room was now full. The players were all in place. The petty tyrant of a bank manager, the racist bully of a cop, the terrified, impotent captain, the panicked corporate executive, and at the head of the table, the man they had all wronged holding all the cards. Now that we're all here, Marcus began, his voice dropping to a level that forced everyone to lean in. We can begin, Captain. A few hours ago, I was physically assaulted and falsely arrested in one of this city's financial institutions by one of your officers at the behest of one of their managers. He looked from Riley to Hargrove, his gaze lingering on each of them for a cold, deliberate moment. I believe it's time we reviewed the evidence. He nodded towards the corner of the room. A young man in a tech support polo shirt who had slipped in unnoticed while the executives were arriving pressed a button on a laptop. A large monitor on the wall flickered to life. He had come prepared. Sarah Lee's courier had not only delivered the footage, but an AV technician to play it. The unblinking eye of the camera was about to become their judge, jury, and executioner. The image on the screen was crisp, high definition, and shot from a wide angle just above the teller line. It showed the entire bank lobby in perfect clarity. The audio was even clearer. The bank's state-of-the-art security system designed to capture every whisper of a potential robbery picked up everything. The recording began with Marcus standing calmly by the pillar. It showed Officer Riley striding in full of aggression. The camera captured the entire exchange, every word broadcast through the high-fidelity speakers in the conference room. "This the guy?" Riley's voice boomed. "That's him. He's trying to pass a fraudulent check." Hargrove's voice smug and self-important. Kevin Hargrove squirmed in his chair. William Grant, his boss, stared at him, his face a granite mask of contempt. Tom Riley watched, his jaw clenched, still believing he was in the right. The scene continued. "Let me see some ID and the check." "Marcus Hale from the Willowbrook estate and a check for $3 million. You really thought you could pull this off, didn't you?" Riley's sneering voice filled the room. Captain Ellis closed his eyes, as if in physical pain. "The check is valid, officer," Marcus's calm voice said from the speakers. "I suggest you run it." "Oh, I'll run it. All right." "I think you're a fraud, and this piece of paper is fake." Then came Hargrove's voice, eagerly piling on. "This check is fake, and you're a fraud." William Grant made a small, choking sound. His branch manager hadn't just made a procedural error. He had actively libeled a man on the floor of his own bank. Then came Marcus's warning, his voice quiet and prophetic on the recording. "You are making a catastrophic mistake, Mr. Hargrove." And then the climax. The video showed Riley's face contorting in rage. It showed him yell, "Don't you threaten him, kid!" It showed his fist drawing back. It showed the brutal, unprovoked punch landing squarely on Marcus's jaw. The sound of the impact, amplified by the speakers, made everyone in the room flinch. The collective gasp of the bank customers was audible. The video continued showing the violent arrest, the shove against the pillar, the triumphant, racist whisper. "You think you can just waltz in here, kid? You're going to jail for a long, long time." The technician stopped the video. Silence descended on the room, thick and absolute. It was undeniable. A clear, unambiguous act of assault, battery, and wrongful arrest, all packaged with racist commentary. Kevin Hargrove was ashen. He looked like a ghost. Tom Riley stared at the blank screen, a dawning horror finally penetrating his thick skull. He had been so sure, so right. But seeing it played back, stripped of his self-justification, it was just ugly. It was criminal. Marcus let the silence stretch out, letting the weight of what they had just seen crush them. Finally, he turned his gaze to William Grant. "William," he said, his voice deceptively soft. "As a member of the board for the parent company of Hargrove Banking, I am of course deeply concerned about the bank's liability, but as a customer who was just assaulted in one of your branches, I'm more concerned about your personnel. What is your response to what you have just witnessed?" Grant didn't hesitate. He turned to Kevin Hargrove, his eyes blazing with a cold corporate fury. "Kevin," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Clear out your desk. You are terminated, effective immediately. Your security credentials have already been revoked. An escort will be waiting for you at the branch to supervise you while you collect your personal belongings. You are a disgrace to this company." Hargrove made a whimpering sound. "But I thought the check." "The check was perfectly valid, you idiot," Grant roared. "It was a direct transfer from one of Mr. Hale's own corporate accounts. You didn't even bother to run the routing number." He turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Hale, on behalf of the entire corporation, then the door opened. A sharp-looking man in a dark suit who had been waiting outside stepped in. It was Jamal Rivera, the civil rights attorney. He must have taken a private jet." He walked directly to Tom Riley and placed a thick legal document on the table in front of him. "Officer Riley," Rivera said, his voice resonating with courtroom authority. "You've just been served. That is a civil lawsuit for assault, battery, libel, wrongful arrest, and violation of my client's civil rights. We are seeking $15 million in damages." Riley stared at the papers as if they were a snake. $15 million. His entire world dissolved in that moment. His house, his pension, his future, all of it gone. He looked at his captain for help. But Ellis wouldn't even meet his gaze. He was on his own. The trap had been sprung. The consequences were no longer abstract. They were here in this room on paper, and they were just getting started. The aftermath was not a single explosion, but a series of controlled demolitions that systematically dismantled the lives of Kevin Hargrove and Tom Riley. For Hargrove, the public firing was only the beginning. He was not allowed to resign quietly. William Grant, under immense pressure from the board, which was to say from Marcus, made sure the termination was for gross misconduct. In the tight-knit world of high finance, such a mark on one's record was a death sentence. Hargrove was blacklisted. Every door he knocked on was politely but firmly shut in his face. The story, though not released to the press, spread like wildfire through industry-back channels. He was the manager who assaulted the owner. He became a cautionary tale, a punchline at corporate retreats. Within 6 months, he had sold his house at a loss and was forced to move his family 3 states away to take a humiliating low-level job at a small credit union. His ambition, the driving force of his life, had led him directly off a cliff. Every morning he would look in the mirror and see not a rising star, but a fool who had thrown everything away for a moment of ugly, prejudiced pride. For Tom Riley, the consequences were even more severe. The $15 million lawsuit was a guillotine hanging over his head. The police union provided him with a lawyer, but faced with the crystal-clear video evidence, there was no defense. The city's attorneys, terrified of a public trial that would expose the department to massive scandal, quickly moved to settle. But Marcus didn't just want money. He wanted accountability. As part of the settlement, Riley was forced to resign from the police force, forfeiting his pension. He issued a public written apology, which Jamal Rivera's team then had published in the city's largest newspaper. The settlement amount, though confidential, was enough to ensure Riley would be financially ruined for the rest of his life. He lost his job, his reputation, and the very identity he had built around his badge and gun. He was no longer a man of authority. He was just another civilian, stripped of his power, haunted by the memory of a single fateful punch. The system he had used as a weapon had been turned against him with devastating precision. But Marcus's war was never just about 2 men. It was about the system that created them. He leveraged the incident with brutal efficiency. The settlement from the city wasn't pocketed. It became the seed money for the Hale Forward Foundation, a new organization dedicated to funding independent civilian oversight of the police department and providing legal aid to victims of police misconduct. He forced the city council to pass a new, stricter set of protocols for use of force and de-escalation training, with his foundation overseeing its implementation. His work with Hargrove Banking was even more direct. As chairman, he didn't just fire a manager. He reformed the company from the top down. He instituted a mandatory quarterly implicit bias training program for every single employee, from the tellers to the top executives. He created a new corporate division focused on community outreach and investment in underserved neighborhoods. He changed the bank's hiring and promotion policies to actively seek and elevate diverse talent, ensuring that the boardrooms and managers' offices would begin to reflect the reality of the country they served. He turned a moment of personal violation into a catalyst for sweeping institutional change. He had taken their ugliest impulse and used it to build something better. A year later, Marcus Hale stood on the steps of the newly opened Hargrove Banking Community Hub, located in a neighborhood that the bank had ignored for decades. The hub offered financial literacy classes, small business loans, and after-school programs. The navy linen blazer was gone, replaced by a simple, elegant charcoal suit. He wasn't there for a photo op. He was there to listen to a presentation by a young entrepreneur, a black man who had just received his first business loan from the hub. He looked at the vibrant, hopeful faces in the room, and for a fleeting moment, he thought of Kevin Hargrove and Tom Riley. He had heard they were both broken men living diminished lives in the shadows. He felt no pity for them, but no satisfaction either. They were no longer characters in his story. They were merely the cost of progress. Their hard karma had been swift and absolute, a perfect and terrible reflection of their actions. They had tried to tear down a man based on the color of his skin, and in doing so had torn down their own worlds. The real victory wasn't their downfall. It was this hub, the new policies, the change in the conversation. Power, he mused, was not about the ability to destroy. That was easy. True power was the ability to endure destruction, and then to build something better and stronger in its place. He had faced down their prejudice, their fists, and their badges, and he had transformed their hate into an engine for hope. What did you think of the karma served to Officer Riley and Manager Hargrove? Was it a fitting price to pay for their actions? More importantly, what do you think is the most effective way to combat the kind of systemic prejudice we saw in this story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is incredibly valuable.